It's live.
It is. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 26 of the Fantasy Timeline. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL. I'm with my main man, Bill at Super Duperflex. Bill, how you doing, man?
Good. Going through a little withdrawal. My rookie drafts are just starting to taper off, and looks like I'm going to need to join some startups pretty soon. I hear our guest, he's been struggling with the same issue.
Hey, I've been okay. I've been okay.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I actually still have rookie drafts that have not even started yet. So they're spaced out. It's feeding my addiction, if you will.
So if you guys are with us in the YouTube live stream, you obviously see that we have a guest. If you're listening to us in podcast form, you obviously hear a voice. We have John Bauer with us. Just an awesome dude. John, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that.
And if you don't know, I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't, but if you don't know, co-host of the Dynasty Theory. If you're not listening, subscribe right now. You can do two things at once. Listen to us, subscribe. It'll make you a better Dynasty player for sure.
And you'll be entertained.
I like to think we're somewhat entertaining, and we've had great guests. I mean, we even let people like Bill on the show, so that tells you, we're nice guys over there at Dynasty Theory.
Yeah,
I know. Bill always tells me about how he hobnobs with the fancy guests that you guys have on Dynasty Theory. How he's too cool for me now because he gets to be on Dynasty Theory with, and you guys do. You guys have some great guests. I'm an avid listener, so yeah, you guys have some great people on, and Bill. So
right.
That's always a plus.
I will tell you, the response we got from the episode that Bill was on, it was fantastic, actually. Probably more so than some of the other guests that we've had. So kudos to you, Bill.
It's that 750 followers I have. I really brought it strong.
I always tell people, I say, Bill is here. He's smart. He's the person you should listen to on the podcast. I'm just here to say incendiary things. I'm kind of the Stephen A. Smith of this podcast, if you will.
Give me a break.
I'm not here so much for my knowledge base. I'm just here to say a bunch of things, maybe get Bill riled up, and then let Bill's big brain take over. So I'm not surprised that he got some good response on your pod there. But before we get into the news, and I guess in a way this is news, want to let all you guys know that we're excited to announce we are a part of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, or the DAP Network, as you will hear Russ and Brian call it. Just to let you guys know, nothing's going to change about the format of the show. We're still going to be all over Twitter. We're going to be throwing our opinions, seeing what you guys think, and nothing's going to change on that front. But you're going to now be able to find us on the network along with the Trade Addicts podcast and the brand new Dynasty Junkies podcast. And that's another one. If you guys aren't listening, again, go back, subscribe to Dynasty Junkies. Two really smart guys. They're going to be doing big things. So we're tag teaming with those guys. Next week, you'll be able to find our YouTube stream on the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network YouTube page. You can just search that on YouTube or follow the link that we'll put in the description of this podcast. Bill and I, we're going to have a lot of fun with this. We're excited, and we can't wait to bring you guys along for the ride. So now that we got that bit of housekeeping out of the way, it is the news. So I guess the biggest news of the week was Andy Dalton was released from the Bengals and signs with the Cowboys. A 1-year, $3 million contract with $4 million in incentives. So, Bill, you're our super flex expert. How do you feel about Andy D to the big D?
First thing, I want to warn John that we have another Dan on this podcast. We have a Cowboys guy, so just forewarning for you that Josh is a Cowboys guy.
Oh, I thought you meant a super intelligent and good looking guy. But yeah, that too. I am a Cowboys fan.
So
I don't know, Josh.
tread
I don't know if you
lightly.
can see it back here, but I have the Gallup jersey right there.
And you know what? I'm so glad that you mentioned Michael Gallup because I am a big
Look what
fan
he
of
did.
the hate that he's getting right now. And that is a guy I'm trying to buy everywhere. So I love it.
Yeah,
But
as for Andy Dalton, I think that it's a good signing for them. I mean, I like him a lot better than Cooper Rush as a backup. And the worst thing that could happen is Dak hold out, right? Or something where he doesn't end up playing.
right.
So at least they have a veteran that they can at least somewhat trust going into the season. Obviously, it disappoints some people that may have him on their rosters, hoping that he landed in New England or something like that. But I mean, if he's going to be a backup, you want him to be a backup for a potent offense like Dallas.
Absolutely. What about you, John? What do you think about the signing?
I think it's exactly what Bill said. He's there to be a backup. It's a contingency plan. If there's an injury, if for some reason Dak does hold out, they have a reliable veteran in there. And it's, with the weapons around them, I even think that Andy Dalton could be successful in that offense. Hell, Josh, I think you could be successful in that offense. You could at least get them to 8-8.
I got a decent arm. So yeah, I think we could do some things.
We might even bump you up to 9-7, but I think that this is a really good thing for players like Gardner Minshew, Jarrett Stidham, at least for the time being until we figure what's going on with Cam Newton. They live another day here. So it's good for those guys that were in kind of precarious situations. But in terms of the Cowboys, there's conspiracies. Oh, there's a lot more to this. Dak better look out. Dalton's coming for his job. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just a contingency plan.
And I told everybody at the beginning of this that you two are both highly intelligent, and you guys gave the right answer. I've seen so many people on Twitter, on ESPN, on everywhere that talks about football or fantasy football saying that, this is leverage against Dak Prescott. If he doesn't show up, they have Andy Dalton and they can kind of lord this over Dak's head. Guys, it's a 1-year, $3 million contract. He's not even a high paid backup. He is a moderate to low priced backup who just happened to be a pretty good starter in Cincinnati considering what he had at his disposal. It's 1 year, $3 million, and people always go to the $4 million in incentives. So actually went on Spotrac because I didn't know what those incentives were. So for Andy Dalton to clean up on these $4 million in incentives, he needs to have 35% of the regular season snaps, 50% of the Super Bowl snaps, and a Super Bowl win. Don't get me wrong. If Andy Dalton collects on the $4 million of incentives, it was well worth it. But let's face it,
don't get me wrong, he's never going to collect on all $4 million.
Well, exactly. And if he does, I'll be a happy Dallas Cowboys fan. But let's face it, barring a Dak Prescott injury, he's not touching any of that money. And he would need an injury plus a Nick Foles-like playoff run in order to collect all of it. So you guys nailed it. I mean, it's a backup. It's, I think it's a great price for Andy Dalton, considering, like you said, John, New England's job was open. There would have at least been a quarterback battle in Jacksonville if they had gone that route. But instead, he's in Dallas, and I think he gets a year. I don't think he plays unless there's a Dak injury, and then he goes back out in 2021 on the free agent market again at the beginning, and he can probably secure himself at least a battle for a starting position somewhere else. So knock that one out. And, a little bit of lesser news, but I love the guy, so I wanted to throw it in here. Frank Gore signs a 1-year contract with the Jets. And, I think my dad may have watched Frank Gore play on black and white TV his rookie year. Guy's been around forever. I think he may have played for all for every team in the NFL at this point. But does this, Bill? We'll start with you first. Does this, tilt the needle Frank Gore in any way? What are your dynasty prospects on him?
I don't think it really affects anything too much. I mean, I know the goal was to decrease carries and touches for Bell this year because I know he had like a huge percentage of their running back touches last year. I think that's all it is. He's going to be a guy that they might try to use down the goal line, but it's not like he was exceptionally effective at it even when he got all those carries last year. So I'm not really sure how long it's going to last. I think he's pretty much probably going to be that kind of what Washington hopes Adrian Peterson is for them. Just that backup guy that can kind of guide the younger players and jump in if they really need him.
What about you, John?
I was kind of confused by this, to be honest. So Le'Veon Bell, if you look at the way his contract is structured, after 2020, he can be cut with minimal dead cap. It's about $4 million. So with his age, the way the contract's set up, and what seemed to be hesitancy from Adam Gase last year when talking about Le'Veon Bell, it didn't seem like he was thrilled that they gave him the contract.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually surprised because I expected them to kind of run Le'Veon Bell into the ground this year. If he gets hurt, if he, adds additional tread on the tires, it's not a big deal. But, I think this 1-year signing by Frank Gore, maybe it's a sign of things to come here for Pirine. Maybe they want to bring somebody in that they know he can learn from. I'm not saying you can't learn from Le'Veon Bell, but maybe Frank Gore was brought in to be that mentor type player. I don't know. I like Bill said, I don't think it really is going to have much of an impact on Le'Veon Bell and his fantasy production here in 2020. So I'm not changing his value. It's no different than it was a week ago for me, but it is interesting. I see it as a depth piece.
Yeah. And I was kind of along the same lines as you, John. I was a little confused by the signing just because it seemed like obviously they had Le'Veon Bell in place. Then they go in the 4th round and they draft LaMichael Pirine. And I thought, okay, here's the backup in case Lev Bell gets hurt. It's this administration drafted him, so it's their guy. And then kind of Frank Gore comes into town. And as much as we kind of almost always say with Frank Gore since he's left San Francisco, he's just going to come here. He's going to be a depth piece. He's a backup in case the starter gets hurt. And he always just kind of seems to, at some point, just kind of take away a little bit of value from whoever the starter is in that area. And I don't think a lot changes with Lev Bell, but I was a little confused by it because I just didn't understand why the Jets felt like Frank Gore was necessary with Pirine, with Bell. But, who knows? You guys could be right. It's a depth piece, and that's it. Maybe he's kind of a de facto running back coach where he gets in there. They kind of tell Pirine to stay attached to Frank Gore just to learn how to be a pro, learn how to take care of yourself, kind of learn the ins and outs of the NFL and have that kind of value to the team.
One thing I will say, Josh, you mentioned Frank Gore. We always see him as a depth piece, but he comes in and takes significant work off of the presumed starter. It always seems to be a younger player, though. Devin Singletary in his rookie year, Kenyon Drake, not in his rookie year, but nobody really knew what Adam Gase was doing down there in Miami. And right. And it's interesting because apparently the Raiders had interest in Frank Gore. And why wouldn't they? Because Gruden loves these guys that are 110 years old as well. But he felt comfortable with the relationship he had with Adam Gase. And, obviously Adam Gase feels comfortable with the relationship he has with Frank Gore. So I think it makes sense from that perspective. But I don't know if he's going to take much work off of Le'Veon Bell. Now, if he does, that kind of tells me maybe the Jets are looking to keep Bell beyond 2020. Because if you're not, why preserve him at all?
Right.
Unless they're planning on not giving Bell a lot of touches later in the season so that he doesn't get hurt and they don't have to guarantee his contract next year. I mean, they might just be like, hey, we need to get rid of him. But honestly, like, to me, the signing of Gore is more an indictment on their third and fourth running backs. I don't think it has really any effect. And I don't necessarily, I mean, you can't just go in with P. Ryan being your number 2. I mean, he's a rookie. He doesn't know a lot. Who knows how good he is at blocking. I mean, I think you can at least give Gore the benefit of the doubt of being a good blocker. So I just don't think that. I think it's more an indictment on like Trenton Cannon or Josh Adams or, one of those guys than it is on anybody else.
Look at Bill scoring bonus points knowing the running back depth chart of the New York Jets. Good for you. But yeah, all kidding aside, it's
our lads. Thank you.
And you could be right about too. Maybe it's just a way to make sure that they don't completely run him into the ground, and then an injury comes up and they have to guarantee him for another year, and all of that contractual mess that happens in the NFL. But yeah, it was I just love the guy because he's 37 years old and he's still plugging away. And this was a guy who had knee issues in college, and teams were worried about during the draft if he would be able to hold up in the NFL. And while I don't know this as 100% fact, I would put a hefty bet that he's the only running back left from the 2005 draft class.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah.
So, good for Frank Gore. I'll be glad to see him out there again. And we'll go with that. But now that we knocked out the news, let's get into what we've seen on the timeline. So this first one comes from Dean at the Mean Dean 10. Who is the cheapest buy now with the most upside in Dynasty? Format doesn't matter a whole lot, other to say 1 QB full PPR. I mean, if that's what you're going with, I guess the format does matter a little bit. But John, why don't we start first with you? Cheapest buy now with the most upside in Dynasty.
So when I saw this question, I wanted to look at it from two different sides here. Well, for both, any players going outside of the first 15 rounds in Superflex startups. So I didn't want to, cherry pick and get somebody with early draft capital. But then you look at it and there's obviously rookies, young players, but there's veterans that can help you win now that are dirt cheap, especially in startups. So looking at some of the younger guys, and I take part in a lot of tight end premium leagues. So I threw a few tight ends in here, but Bryson Hopkins, Adam Troutman, those are the 2 tight ends in this rookie class that I actually have some interest in. Immediate producers, probably not, but longer term assets that you can get really late in drafts, easy bench stash for me. Van Jefferson, he's a rookie that interests me, somebody that we talked about on our Dynasty Theory podcast, the Theory Throwdown. And then you have other players, Jay Sternberger, Anthony Miller, Russell Gage. I like Joshua Kelly and Darrington Evans looking at rookie drafts. And then one tight end that I really like, and I think he's going to get a lot of run this year, is Jay Sternberger out there in Green Bay. There's talks that he's going to be moved out to the slot. They did not attack that wide receiver position in the draft. And I think he's going to be somebody that Aaron Rodgers is comfortable with as his second option there behind Devontae Adams. So those are just some guys, again, all ranges there, especially in terms of age, but guys that I have my eye on that have upside in the short and long-term outlook for Dynasty.
And now I understand, while during the Superflex Army 2 draft, why I got so frustrated when John had a pick in front of me, because I love Troutman, not only because he's on the Saints, but the Saints actually traded up to grab him, and they dealt away a lot of day 3 picks to get him at the end of the 3rd round. So obviously it was someone who was on their radar and someone they felt like they needed to get onto the team. Love the Darrington Evans play there too. So now I understand why I was so frustrated when JB would get ahead of me and just start sniping me from far distances. What about you, Bill? And we got one here from John McGlynn, Nikhil Harry. But what about you, Bill?
So I went to like the bottom of the ADP, and these are guys that you can get for virtually nothing that I think have and I think you can get a pretty good bang for your buck if something happens. The first one's Gio Bernard. If Mixon holds out, Bernard has a decent shot of getting a lot of play. He's 275 in ADP right now on DLF. So, I mean, that's just crazy.
Criminal.
You know, it's virtually, you know, it costs you nothing. CJ Uzama, the tight end for the Bengals. Tyler Eifert just left. They do have Sample, but he's not necessarily a great receiving tight end. So Uzama is basically the tight end that you would want for fantasy purposes. So in a tight end premium, I mean, he's a good grab right now, really. And if you're in any 2 tight end leagues, I mean, he's definitely worth grabbing.
Bill, real quick,
Alan,
shameless plug here, but I also write some articles for Fantasy Pros, and in my most recent article, Buy Low Options, in CJ Uzama, he was the last one I mentioned, and I said, you know, I put in suggested prices that people should be looking to pay, and I said that you could get him for half of a sandwich, but if the person that has him doesn't like sandwiches, probably a late 4th would get it done. But I absolutely love him. I'm pulling up my rosters here on the stickyboard.com. He has to be one of my most rostered players. So he's dirt cheap. Why not?
Yep. And then also Alan Lazard's 234, but I think because of the draft, his ADP is going to be a lot higher now. So, I mean, he's still worth grabbing. I think he's going to be out on the field a lot for Green Bay this year. Albert Wilson, he blew up a couple years ago and then got hurt. And then last year he pretty much didn't play too much, but they're still trying to find somebody who's going to play the slot for Miami. And he's worth the risk just for the potential that he is healthy now and can get back to how he was playing a couple years ago. And then the last one is Gerald Everett. He's 201 in ADP, and he was doing exceptionally well before he got hurt, and then that's when Higbee came in and just blew up after that. So I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets in Los Angeles this year, and you know, who knows? He might end up being their big slot guy, and they might move Kupp outside a little bit more than they have since they lost Cooks. So those are guys I think are worth at least looking into, and I'm probably going to try to make some offers tonight after I did a little bit of this research.
And it's the last year of Everett's deal. He could easily bounce somewhere else and be really utilized as the number 1 tight end somewhere.
And you know, another shameless plug for Superflex Army too. I snagged him there. My tight end strategy in that league was just kind of, let me get a bunch of young guys that, you know, have some level of upside, and hopefully 1 or 2 of them stick, and the rest of them will either be traded or dumped at some point. So I like that Everett one as well. John, again, with Devin Funchess, you spoke about Alan Lazard. Do you think Devin Funchess comes in there and takes any of the shine off of the Lazard King there?
I don't hate adding Funchess because you can literally get him for nothing. I mean, it's funny. Like, I grabbed him in a few startups just because I'm grabbing him in like 26th round or something like that. And I mean, it's worth a shot. People forget about him. I mean, he did have a couple decent years, and then last year he signed for 10 mil, but he got hurt and never played. So, I mean, he's a flyer. He's worth it as a flyer.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, you know, probably at what his ADP is, and looking at some of the other guys that'll probably be around the same ADP, it's probably not a bad way to go. Honestly, when I saw this question, I kind of went right off the top of my head. And
I'm glad you're putting in the work, Josh.
Yeah, listen, you know, I do what I do. And the first one I came up was your boy Carry-On. I just feel like right after the draft, they got DeAndre Swift. You know, people were throwing dirt on the grave of Carry-On Johnson. I think, and I've heard this in a lot of places, but I think it needs to be restated. We don't know what's going to happen as far as OTAs and training camps, when the season's going to start, if it's going to start on time. And that's not good for rookies. Rookies need the time to get in, get acclimated to the building, get acclimated to being a pro, and they're most likely not going to get as much time as rookies normally get. And even with that time, we see a lot of rookies struggle that first year because it's such an adjustment going from the college game to the NFL game. And I think that's going to prove valuable for guys like Marlon Mack with Jonathan Taylor in town and Kerryon Johnson with Swift in town. So, he's the first one that I think a lot of people will try to get off of their roster that you can probably get for a good price or get them a little bit deeper in startups. I also said Tevin Coleman, sort of for the same reason, Bill, you mentioned about Devin Funchess. He signed for a good bit of money in San Francisco, and injuries and the system that they like to play in San Fran, where a bunch of guys get out there and do a bunch of things. But if Tevin Coleman can stay healthy and kind of flash what he did in Atlanta, I could see him being that number one guy that gets a majority of those high value targets. So he's another one. And then I just wrote the Dolphins backfield. I mean, Matt Breida and Jordan Howard aren't sexy names, but they have proven valuable in fantasy for stretches at a time. And I think that in a backfield that last year, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the Dolphins' leading rusher. That's Brian Flores, I think, is trying to bring a New England style offense to Miami. They like to use their running backs. They like to get them all involved. They like to get them all out there. And I think Matt Breida and Jordan Howard, their biggest weaknesses are staying healthy. But if either one of those guys can stay healthy, you could probably get those guys for cheap and they could produce big time for you. So there you go, Dean. Those are some guys you can try to target. There are a lot of good ones out there.
I really like the Tevin Coleman call. Like, I think that, everybody is so on the Mostert train right now, and they completely forget that San Fran likes to do the same thing. They're using everybody, and it just so happened that nobody else was healthy at the end of the season, and that's why Mostert got all that run. So I think he's a fantastic get right now if you're a team that's in contention.
And for me, yeah. I was ecstatic about Jordan Howard's situation here with the draft, because the expectation was they were going to invest an early pick on a running back because they had so much draft capital. I have 14 shares of Jordan Howard, so I'm actually really happy. This is probably the best case scenario for him. And it's also somebody that, Matt Breida, I'm not saying we're not hoping for an injury. We never are, but he's not exactly durable. So if he were to go down, Jordan Howard, he's going to reap the benefits. And Kerryon Johnson, I just think him and DeAndre Swift, I do think there is going to be a lot more of a timeshare than people are going to hope, especially people that invested in DeAndre Swift. And I said the same thing for year one with Kansas City, Edwards-Helaire, and my man Damian Williams. And then same thing with Indianapolis. And Josh, you said it. It's going to be really difficult if this offseason shortened it all. It's going to benefit the veterans in these situations. But if Kerryon Johnson is healthy, he's going to get used a lot more than people would like, I think.
Yeah, and here's another one. This is probably more for your deeper rookie drafts, but staying on that San Francisco train. JaMycal Hasty, that's a guy who I think pretty sure he was a UDFA by the 49ers. If you want to, maybe try to look for the next Raheem Mostert, I think JaMycal Hasty is the guy. I'm not saying he's even going to make the team, but if he's there, San Francisco always seems to get bitten by the running back injury bug. and you see the Matt Breidas blow up, you see the Raheem Mosterts blow up, the Jeff Wilsons blow up, you know, maybe deep in your rookie draft, or maybe if you have an extra spot on your bench and he went undrafted, you snag him just to see if he turns into the next Raheem Mostert, and you pay very little for him. So that was just another guy I kind of popped in my head as you guys were talking.
Really quick, you mentioned undrafted free agents, and I'm on the tight end train here with all the guys I listed, but Thaddeus Moss, he's out there in Washington. He actually was one of the tight ends. I had 5 tight ends pre-draft that I really liked. It was Bryson Hopkins, Adam Troutman, Alberto, Thaddeus Moss, and then Hunter Bryant. Well, Hunter Bryant and Thaddeus Moss weren't drafted, but Moss is going into possibly one of the best situations for a young tight end. There's no competition. Who is it? Jeremy Sprinkle, I think. Yep. So, you know, in an offense that needs playmakers, Thaddeus Moss could contribute right away if he makes the team and he sticks around.
Right.
But again, he's a dirt cheap option, just like you talked about with Hasty. So why not?
Yeah, and it's funny. I saw a tweet, and again, I hate when I see these tweets and I don't bookmark them to remember who said them. But it says, you know, look for Thad Moss. His competition is Jeremy Sprinkle and a ham sandwich. So, which is true. I mean, I don't even know if Our Lads has the tight end depth chart for Washington because it's so terrible. So he's actually a guy that I have gotten in almost every rookie draft in that 4th, 5th, 6th round, where, you know, at that point you're just kind of pulling straws and seeing who's available. He's a guy that I always seem to get because, I mean, honestly, I think he has a very good chance, as long as he stays healthy, of being the starter in Washington. Now, obviously, you know, there's a second wave of free agency that's going to happen and guys are going to get cut. So that could change. But as of right now, there's really no competition in Washington to, you know, for that tight end position.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much limited to being a big slot, if anything. So I think he's competing more with anybody who'd be playing that position than tight end, because he is absolutely not really a tight end at all. So, I mean, that is his, you know, that's what they're labeling him. So if he is a starter, absolutely, he's fantastic for that situation. But I mean, I think he's going to be really limited in the pros just based on his skill set. But I mean, if he plays and he's a tight end, I mean, that's all he's going to be out there for is catching passes.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying pick up Thad Moss. He's going to be, you know, tight end 7, you know, this year, but he's going to be, you know, barring injury or barring, you know, some kind of trade or pickup by Washington, I have a feeling he has a really good shot of being the starting tight end in Washington, just because there's no other competition. You know, obviously, if, you know, someone gets cut and, you know, they snag somebody, that can change really quick. But right now, he seems to have kind of a clear path to starting touches. And, you know, depending on the size of your dynasty league, sometimes just grabbing a starter is good enough to have on your team and at least have him on your bench for, you know, a just in case. But we got this next one here from Dirty Bird Dynasty at Dirty Bird Dino. League, I'm assuming his league, is heavily sleeping on Akers, and I don't know why. I'm sure people want to default to the line is bad, but ugh. Have you seen what he was running behind for 3 years? Have you seen his yard after contact? So I'll start with you, John. Do you think that dynasty players are sleeping on Cam Akers?
So before the draft, I actually had him as my running back 3 in this class. I had it going Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers. You know, he really showed up at the combine, and he was one of those players, kind of the equivalent to Jalen Reagor over there at the wide receiver position. His lack of production, it was attributed to something going on with the team. Rager, it was the quarterback position. And then with Cam Akers, it was that bad offensive line. And I was one of those people. I was an apologist. I said, he's going to land in a better situation in the NFL. I was hoping maybe Atlanta, and he's going to do good things. Well, he goes to a crowded backfield. However you feel about Darrell Henderson, I don't like him, but he's still going to have an impact and role on that team. That line is not good. So I've seen him go as early as running back 3 still. I have him as my running back 6 right now. There are 5 running backs without a shadow of a doubt I feel very comfortable taking ahead of Akers. And I was getting in arguments with people prior to the NFL draft. I was on the Akers train, but I'm not willing to pay that price. And I don't know if I've picked him up in one rookie draft just because of where he's currently going. So I think a lot of people, they might be sleeping on him just because he's lower on their draft boards. But I've seen there's always one person in the league that's willing to pull that trigger heck of a lot earlier than I am. So some might be sleeping, but some people are still really high on him.
And John, it's funny because Cam Akers was my RB3 before the draft. And the same argument for me. Look at the production with what he had at Florida State. I always brought up the stat. I saw it on Twitter. Wish I could give credit to the person who put it out there. This is my every time. I'm the worst. But there was a stat of yards before contact, and it had the top 5 guys. And then way on the bottom of the list is Cam Akers with -2 yards before contact. So literally, the guy is getting touched before he can do anything, and he's still producing. But I was on the open bar a couple weeks ago, and this was brought up, and someone said, well, Cam Akers ran behind a bad line at Florida State. And I said, well, congratulations. He's running behind a bad line for Los Angeles. And, I got a lot of pushback because it's like, well, if you believed in him then, why don't you believe in him now? And it's like, because now I know his landing spot. I thought he was going to go somewhere, like you said, like Atlanta, like Baltimore, something like that, where you go, oh man, I really like this spot. They're going to run him a lot. The line is a lot better than what he had. And, I did a little, I won't say a deep dive because I think that's an insult to people who actually do deep dives. But I looked at what he did last year. Just his stats, just kind of a very cursory look at what he did. First of all, he didn't face a scoring defense besides Florida the last week of the season that was better than 73rd in the country. So he wasn't facing elite defenses. Now, the one you can say elite defense guy, a team that put players into the NFL, he went up against Clemson. 9 attempts, 34 yards. I mean, the defense, as much as we're saying, his line has to be better than what he had at Florida State just because they're NFL players. I mean, that's true. But those defenses are a lot better too. And I think in LA behind that line, it's going to be very hard. I also agree with you. I never bought into Darrell Henderson. I thought the hype last year was way overblown. But he does have some draft capital. And let's remember Malcolm Brown too. Malcolm Brown was getting touches over Darrell Henderson last year. So I can't believe that all of a sudden, a year removed from that, he's all of a sudden non-existent in that backfield. I think there's, I think it's going to be the classic running back by committee. And I don't know if Cam Akers' situation improved that much. So people, might be sleeping. And who knows, maybe Cam Akers, he comes into the NFL and he does what he did at Florida State. The line doesn't really matter. He's just that good. But, he worries me. He's my RB5 right now. So he dropped from 3 to 5 for me just because everyone ahead of him is in a good situation. I mean, you can't name any of the 4 guys ahead of him that you say they're in a bad situation. So that's my take on it. What about you, Bill? Your mic is muted.
That's
Be a
the first time
professional,
in
man.
first time in 26 episodes that's happened.
Be a professional.
Well, good. You didn't get my and all that in there. But I think that he has some intriguing traits. I think that he is going to have a struggle playing in Los Angeles. I think that he is going to be in a committee of sorts. But why is the league or his league, I don't know who he means by the league, but if it's the NFL sleeping on Akers, I'd have to say it's because no team had a chance to bring players in to look at them and put them into the tests and that sort of thing that they want to do. And so you got to do it based off of what you can see. And unfortunately, based on his situation in college, he just didn't have that tape that, shows that he is capable of everything that they want to see yet. And consistently, at least. So I think that that's probably hurt him, just the fact with this, quarantine that everybody's under. And that just put him behind the 8 ball a little bit. But, I mean, he was still drafted very early, so it's not like the league as a whole was down on him. He just happens to be number 5 or 4 in pretty much everybody's checklist after landing spots.
Is there a concern for you guys that he may have developed bad habits in college running behind that bad offensive line? That was one of the knocks and one of the cons when looking at him that a lot of people have brought up. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I think that has to be on people's radar.
I mean, it's legit. It's just like a quarterback that gets hit all the time. After a while, they kind of get a little antsy and they get, they're not thinking about what they're supposed to do. They're thinking about avoiding things. And so that could be an issue. But I think as a running back, you're just looking for where you're supposed to run. And I mean, that's pretty much all you can do. And he had to do those dancing and all that kind of stuff because the guys were right on him when he got the ball. So I think it's a little bit different for a running back because he gets the ball and then he runs to a certain, area. And so I think he can kind of overcome that more so than like if a quarterback starts to get jittery every time they go for a 5-step drop.
And I also think that he's going to have NFL coaching. So there are going to be running back coaches and offensive coordinators and head coaches that are going to say to him, hey, like all the dancing in the backfield, whatever the bad habits might be. It's kind of the same when we talk about running backs that fumble a lot. That can be coached away if you have good coaching. And I do think that LA, you could say what you want about them, but I think they do have some good coaches there. So if there are bad habits that were picked up, and honestly, those bad habits might actually end up serving him well because he might need them running behind that LA line as well. So, but yeah, I think NFL coaching will take care of a lot of that if there are bad habits that are there. But John brought up a good question here. Would you take Akers or Drake in the 4th round if you were on the clock? Just a note at all of the above.
In Dynasty?
I'm assuming this is Dynasty.
That's tough. Like I would probably
Can I trade
take
back? Can I trade back?
Yeah.
That's always my answer.
I mean, I like Drake this year, but I don't necessarily think I could take him over a top 5 running back this year. I'd probably take Akers over Drake. I wouldn't say where in the, what round, but I think for Dynasty, I would take Akers.
With all the negatives I just said about Akers, I also would take Akers. It's just Drake, last year of his deal here, and where's he going to land? Is Arizona going to extend him again, or is he going to find another good landing spot? I think he's going to have a tremendous season. He's going to have top 5 upside this year, in my opinion. He's going to get the usage, but I like a little bit more longevity possibly. So you're trading what I think is really high-end production in 1 year for what should be, at least playing out a rookie contract. So I'll take Akers reluctantly.
Okay, guys, I just want to give you some good news. Currently in one of my, it feels like 10 trillion rookie drafts right now. I was finally able to make a trade to pick up my favorite guy in the second round. Bill, who is it? Second round, my favorite guy.
Brian Edwards.
You got it right. After trying to trade for like the last 5 picks, I finally got someone to make this trade. So you tell me if you guys like the trade. I got the 211, and I gave up a 2 next year and the 304.
I'm fine with that to get your guy. I have no issue with that. I mean, Bill, you've seen the prices I'm paying for Keyshawn Vaughn. I cut off my left leg to get him in a draft. So,
and that's why they call him One Leg John. And this is something I wanted to talk about too, because I've been on Twitter today and I've seen you changed your name. You're in love with Keyshawn Vaughn. Where have you been drafting him?
So I actually, and this has been, and I don't know if you can see. I'm just going to pull my. There you go.
Feels like draft day all over again.
Right, exactly. So I have, I've been getting a lot of negative feedback, so I'm taking it in stride here. But I have him as my 106 in Superflex drafts, but I have not had to take him that early. Okay. I've got him 110, 111, 112. I've even landed him in the second round, and I think that was
205 for me.
Yeah, there have been spots that I've been able to get him that I'm really happy with. I think I have him on 15 rosters at this point. I've made a few trades to acquire additional shares that I did not get in the rookie drafts. But yeah, I just think, I know there's a lot of negative knocks on him and the fact that he's older than Ronald Jones. I get that. But the things that he's bringing to the table, whether it's pass protection, I know people are excited about Dare. I don't think he's going to be utilized in the passing game nearly as much as people would like. Keyshawn Vaughn last year, he was right there with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of target share. They were both right around 10%. And Cam Akers, I think he was right around like 7.5% last year. Jonathan Taylor, he was close to that 10% threshold, but Wisconsin didn't really throw nearly as much as teams like LSU. But Keyshawn Vaughn, he will be utilized in the passing game. He's good in pass protection. Is he older? Sure. But I think you're really going to get at least 2 really good years of production. You don't have to keep these players until they die. Get the value bump in years 1 and year 2, and you're going to be able to turn it for a nice profit if you want. I know the knock people look at, well, Sony Michel was a little bit older. Doug Martin, he came in, he was a little bit older. And, he had a few good years, but the longevity just isn't there. Especially with running backs, I'm not projecting 5 years out, and I don't think anybody should. The way the landscape changes as quickly as it does, injuries, off the field things, there's a lot going on, and trades and free agency, everything. So 2 to 3 years for running backs, I mean, probably 2 years, I'm okay with it. And I think Keyshawn Vaughn's going to do great things. So maybe one draft, if I have the 101, I might just have to pull the trigger just to say I took Keyshawn Vaughn at 101.
Whoa!
Maybe I won't go that far. I'm not too crazy,
John.
So, and just so the listeners know, what John showed in his background was a chalkboard sign that said Keyshawn Vaughn, no matter what.
And in this league that I just made the trade in, this is the do-gooders leagues that Outhouse runs that are charity leagues. Where was he? There he is. Keyshawn Vaughn was taken at 202. At 201, AJ Dillon. So
I don't get the AJ Dillon. I really don't. Is he built like a house? Yeah. And I know, especially with the draft capital and his body build, the easy comp is Derrick Henry. I'm not ready to put anybody in Derrick Henry's category in terms of physicality and the way he runs. I'm a big Aaron Jones guy. I've grown to love Aaron Jones. I really changed my perception of the way I was looking at him. But I think AJ Dillon, I think he's being overdrafted.
Yeah. I saw a very interesting argument thread about AJ Dillon, and I was just kind of like, I mean, I think he's going to pull value away from Aaron Jones, but to actually draft him onto my team just because I think he's going to pull value from Aaron Jones doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, I definitely wouldn't have him over Keyshawn Vaughn. So, yeah, I saw the love online, and I wanted to know, what parts of the draft you were getting him for. I've seen screenshots of him getting taken, 107, 108, which in my personal opinion is too high, but it's kind of, exactly what you said earlier. To get your guy, if that's your guy, like, go get him. I mean, you'll just feel better. You'll like your team more. Every league that I haven't been able to get Brian Edwards, shameless plug again, Superflex Army, Bill took him, jerk. I haven't liked it, but every league that I get him in, I kind of look at the team and I'm like, there's my guy. He's right there. So if Vaughn is your guy, grab him. And I think you're getting him, in that later first, early second. I mean, I think that's the right spot for him because in my opinion, after the big five, he's the next guy. So
I think the earliest I've taken him was 108. And I had an earlier pick and I was able to move back, pick up the 108 because I knew I was going to be targeting Keyshawn Vaughn. And I think I picked up maybe an early second as well.
Nice.
And I'd have to go back and look, but I think 107, 108 is the earliest I've had to take him. And I know a lot of people, how are you going to pass on these big time wide receivers that are going to play in the NFL at a high level for 10 years? Running backs, they have the short shelf life. I just really like the expectation for me over the next few years for Keyshawn Vaughn.
Absolutely. So, I just wanted to throw that out there because I've seen you've been banging the drum for Keyshawn Vaughn.
And I was joking on Dynasty Theory last week that if he has a bad season, I have to delete my Twitter. I can't show my face.
Listen, it's funny because people, I mean, Bill and I have similar followings. JB, you have a bigger following, but it's funny once you gain some sort of a following, people think that you believe you're perfect in all of your takes. And it's so funny when like the person goes, "You remember what you said about this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me. I was wrong. It happens." I mean, you can
as
tell.
long as you have like one more hit than misses, I think you're okay. Because I'm sure as hell not perfect. I'll tell you that, not even close.
No,
but
it's better being more right than wrong.
Exactly, and in the amount of draft capital and the price that you're paying for certain players, Keyshawn Vaughn, obviously, he's not going to be a cheap asset to acquire in rookie drafts for me. But a lot of the time, my misses they're calculated risks, but also a lot of them they're lower cost ones. Like a lot of people give me a hard time about Dante Moncrief. I was getting him at like wide receiver 50 in startups. And I'm like, I was willing to take that risk, did it pay off? No. And I don't even want to talk about him anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too upset.
I mean, we've all had our misses. I mean, I've had epic ones, and guess what? As long as we keep giving our educated opinions on this thing, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're looking at information. We're watching the games, we're listening to coaches and media members and stuff speak, and we're trying to put it all into a pot, stir it up, and come up with an opinion. Like we're gonna be wrong sometimes. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. And I love it when people come at me and they're like, "You were wrong about this." I was like, "Yep, I was dead wrong about that," and I'm cool with it. It happens. So Bill, I'm gonna let you run with this next one because you threw this out on here, and I think it's really interesting.
All right, so Jared Smola at Smola DS posted this at risk of pissing off Deontay Johnson Hive, and then he provided some stats. 2019 yards per target, James Washington 9.2, Deontay Johnson 7.4. Yards per out run, Washington 1.76, Johnson 1.61. The PFF receiving grade, Johnson 68.8, Washington 68.5. So the point being is that people, at least the implication is that the comparison between Washington and Johnson is a lot closer than people think. I brought this up just because when I was a guest on Dynasty Theory, we were talking about Claypool getting drafted by the Steelers, and I made the mistake of saying that, if they moved him to tight end, and JB said, well, the news just came out right before the pod that they plan on having him play on the outside. And then I made a comment, so he's going to be competing with James Washington. And then Bauer said, you could put a garbage can out there and he'd be competing with James Washington. So this was more of a statistical comparison just for John's benefit. So, John, what's your thoughts on this?
And I'm not even a pro Deontay Johnson guy. I live in Pittsburgh. I have him on a few rosters. I think he is going to do some good things. But when the Steelers drafted him, I said he's going to be a glorified punt returner. And Josh, just like you mentioned before, I was wrong on that because he came out here in year one and he did some really good things. But if you look at when the season progressed, so you talk about all the numbers and metrics you just provided, Bill, as the season progressed, the yards per route run, that's one thing that I think is a very telling metric, and it's somewhat sticky year to year. Well, it shifted. So starting in week 13, I know it's a little bit later in the season, but Deontay Johnson, he was a rookie coming in, that shifted to 1.91 yards per route run against James Washington's 1.81. Then the last 3 weeks of the season, Deontay Johnson, he was up to almost 2. It was 1.99 against James Washington's 1.23. And I think one big thing that people have to look at, and I don't know if there's many James Washington supporters out there, maybe just to be contrarian, but the splits with and without Ben. So with Ben coming back here, I don't think he's a huge fan of James Washington. He doesn't look his way all that often. And I know the splits are a little bit, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because 2 years ago, Antonio Brown was there. Juju had that fantastic season. So this year, it was a little bit different because of everything going on. But James Washington, I'm not a fan at all. And if people want to invest in him, and I know people were excited about his tape coming out of Oklahoma State, I was never one to really, invest in him. And I know you talk about the PFF receiving grades. They're right there, 68 and 68. The PFF grades to me, and this might rub some people the wrong way, I think they're very subjective. And you can sit there and tell me, well, there's a formula, they stick it in there. And I always point to it. They had Carlos Hyde as a top 12 rated running back last year. You can't tell me that's subjective. I'm sorry. So when I see the PFF grades, I kind of go off on a tangent and get all riled up. But yeah, if people want to invest in James Washington, by all means, go ahead. But I think that's a mistake. But they're probably saying the same thing when I invest in Keyshawn Vaughn. So,
here's the thing. I tweeted this as soon as Chase Claypool got drafted. I tweeted RIP James Washington. And sorry, listen, if you still believe in him and you want him on your team, go grab him. You're probably not paying much. If you're wrong, you probably didn't lose out. You didn't probably lose much in a trade for him. But we saw, talking about trash cans, we saw trash cans playing quarterback for Pittsburgh last year, and Deontay still produced. And it's funny because, he said, I doesn't want to piss off the Deontay hive. Well, Bill and I have been kind of the queen bees, if you will, of the Deontay hive. We were talking about him, episode 2, 3, 4, something. He's been a guy since the beginning of this show that we've kind of been like, hey, keep an eye on this guy. He's looking good out there. He's doing some things. And this was at a time that a lot of people weren't talking about Deontay Johnson. And now, obviously, he's kind of a quote unquote bigger name. But yeah, I'm sorry. James Washington is 4th on that depth chart right now. And
he might be worth a buy now, honestly, because the price is going to be so low that, because people are going to think that Claypool's coming in to replace him. I mean, it seems like Pittsburgh's always proactive when they draft their wide receivers, and they're looking a year in advance. And could he just be somebody that they think they might put on the outside and move Deontay into the slot because after Juju leaves, if they don't re-sign him? And so those are kind of my thoughts. Is like maybe he's worth the buy if you can get it for the right price, like a third rounder or something. I mean, I don't know who's going to sell him for that, but I'm not paying more than that. I don't think.
I have no issue with that price. Again, the rookies that you'd be getting in that range, they are dart throws, and you say a third round pick, that's just right around the Chase Claypool area. But for me, I have no interest. I don't think he's a good receiver. I really don't.
And this is. I feel like sometimes as dynasty players, we fall into this trap. We always want to find a good value. Just because something's cheap doesn't mean you should buy it. I mean, listen, if my supermarket starts selling expired meat for 29 cents a pound, I still ain't buying it. I just don't think that's a good choice to make. And
Josh, that's a good deal though, man.
I know.
29. I paid more for expired meat.
So, I mean, like I said, if you think James Washington is worth a flyer, I'm not saying don't get him. I'm just saying that sometimes just because something's cheap doesn't mean it's good or doesn't mean you should buy it.
Well, I think there's at some point a price on anybody who has the potential to start. There's value depending on the price. And I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, it's if you at least if you're buying into the Steelers more so than him specifically, I mean, it may be worth a shot. I mean, I don't like him personally. I'm very much where JB is, but he could be worth a shot. And like, if they don't like him, I mean, how much better are some of the other kind of physical deep threats than him? I mean, a lot of people don't like any of them just because they can't create separation, and that's just not where the offenses are anymore.
Right. Well, I want to just go back into something you said really quick. You said someone that has the opportunity to start. Do you think James Washington really has an opportunity to start, barring multiple injuries on that team?
Absolutely.
See, I think now there's.
I mean, okay. Well, if we're gonna do that, I think he has a way greater chance of starting than I do Thad Moss starting as a tight end for the Redskins. So, I mean, it's all in the eye of the beholder, and
for sure. But we're probably not paying similar prices for those guys. I mean,
they're pretty close.
No, I don't know. You're getting Thaddeus Moss in the 5th round.
Yeah,
I've seen him going in early 4th in a lot of my rookie drafts in the last 4 days.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, me neither. I've gotten him
because it blew my mind. I'm like, why are people even doing this? Like, he's an undrafted free agent tight end.
And I have to start using Sticky Board too to figure, because I know one draft I got him it is a 14-team draft. I got him 411. I just got him in a 16-team draft at 410. I mean, I'm getting him late. I mean, yeah, I guess if you can use a 4th round pick, a 4-1, let's say, to get either James Washington or Thaddeus Moss, then yes, I agree with you. I would rather have James Washington, but I'm not. We're seeing different things, and obviously, different leagues you see different things. But
yep.
I'm seeing more. The earliest he's going is late 4th, and a lot of times he's dipping into the 5th.
That was the case early on, but honestly, all of mine that were going in this weekend into the weekend, I've seen them slowly moving up. But whatever. I mean, it's just the point being is it's more in the eye of the beholder. It's not necessarily a garbage. I think he has more upside and potential as a 2nd round pick or whatever he was, 3rd round pick than an undrafted free agent tight end, I guess is my point. And even for the variance of value between, let's say a mid 4th and a mid to late 3rd, my eyes are just, my brain is just wired differently and where I'd want to take my risk.
Now, I do think James Washington goes into the season as a starter. We talked about the potential for a shortened off season and Chase Claypool coming in and getting acclimated with that offense. So I think he comes in as the 3. Obviously Juju, Deontay Johnson, they're going to be more used in the passing game. Now Eric Ebron's there too, old stone hands. So I think he's going to get some work. And Vance McDonald, he's not dead yet. I think I still have like 25 shares left over on my rosters. He's just going to die on my teams. But I think Claypool eventually he does take over that role that Washington had. And, you talk about maybe a 3rd round pick for him. I would take Van Jefferson over James Washington, and he's going in that range.
For sure. I guess because I only have like one more rookie draft, so my thoughts are on to 21 already. So I was thinking about throwing like a 21 third or something at him.
And Bill, I've seen your teams. You definitely should be focusing on 2021.
Woo!
I'm just kidding. I can get rid of them. Hey, John, I think the only league you and I are in, what happened in that one?
My phone broke. I can't look it up.
I won.
Don't worry, John. He's in a league with both of us this year, and we'll see what happens there.
Oh, I'm not going to win that league. I can tell you that right now.
I've been trying to trade Lamar Jackson. Nobody wants him. I offered Shane, and I got to give him a hard time about this too. But I offered him a really reasonable trade, and he wasn't having it.
Yeah,
but every trade
you offered me it too, and I was just like, I think it was based it's a lot of assets to give up.
It is, and that's a 14-team league, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it is tough.
Like it's tough. Like before the first season, some people aren't even in the heat of it, maybe contending or not. Where they're going to be willing to move those assets for the win.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get offered anything. It's okay though. I'm fine. No big deal.
I'll put something together for you, Josh. Don't worry.
No. Don't pity.
I'll give you a pity offer.
Pity offer them.
Pity offers out here. All right. So this may actually be the most important question we have seen so far. Scott Connor at Charles Chill FFB said, I may have to tune in and ask a question to the guest about how you handle 50+ leagues. John, how do you handle 50+ leagues?
Well, I don't even know why Scott is asking this question because I know he's right behind me. So he has a lot of nerve. But honestly, I was really overwhelmed when these rookie drafts started. And one thing that I have all the alerts on my phone. I get all the emails from my fantasy league. Well, I had to turn a lot of them off. So I have it now. If I get a trade offer or if I'm on the clock, I get the email. Otherwise, I'm not getting all those emails because with all the leagues I'm in, it got really overwhelming. Literally just trying to clean up my inbox. That was a task in and of itself. But yeah, I think the alerts certainly help, but I'm just very active. And Bill, we've talked about this. If you look at my screen time and my usage on my cell phone, and it drives my wife crazy because I'm always on it, but it's astronomical. It really is. So I definitely put in a lot of time, but I will say there are challenges. Like, we're talking about Superflex Army 2. I wasn't sure exactly there were 14 teams in that league. And I made a trade earlier tonight, and I thought it was a 12-team league, and it turned out to be a 14-team league where I actually got additional depth. So once I realized it was 14 teams, I was like, let's go. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah. It's like an extra win.
Settings, I probably should, spend a little more time on that. But overall, handling the leagues, I was in a good amount last year. Setting the lineups, I got into a good cadence. Immediately, Tuesday, I would set my lineups with a preliminary lineup. Thursday, going into the game, another run. And then Sunday morning, I would tinker away once I'm watching fantasy football now. But I think just getting into a good rhythm with all of your teams and, making sure that those alerts, the email alerts, they are very helpful. Yeah. Because otherwise I'm just scrolling through. Am I on the clock? Am I on the clock? Am I on the clock? Yeah. And I really thought I was going to miss a pick here or there, but I had a pretty good week in terms of staying on top of things. So
how do you handle waivers?
That is the big challenge. And I have missed out on players. Now, if there's a certain player I have my eye on, I'll run through and maybe put claims in for that specific player. But knowing the days that waivers process and how much fab I have available. Those are things that are a little rough. So something I should probably keep track of a little bit more. And that's why I really like playing in 14 or 16 team leagues, because the waiver wire, it's really scarce. It's very bare.
Yeah.
So that makes my life a lot easier. Now, if it's a 10 or 12 team league, there are some gems out there, especially to start the season after maybe a week 1 breakout. But that's something that I really need to improve on here in 2020 than I did in 2019. So that's a really good question, Bill.
That's actually I'm in double digits, but not close to where you are. And that was my biggest thing. Like, was the certain leagues were different days. Like, most of mine are Tuesdays and, for Wednesday morning, or there's a few on Thursday, but some of them had waivers that ran on Thursday and Saturday. And it just became too much of a chore to have that many days of looking to see who's available and what's going on. And I ended up getting rid of those leagues solely because of the waivers. And it does take, that's actually why I asked you, because I know it takes a lot of work for me, like looking at my roster, figuring out maybe where do I need some help. And, there's a lot of, reading your team and looking it over and figuring out what, if you have to make a claim, which position, that sort of thing. And kind of just, it takes a lot of time. So that's impressive that you are able to manage that.
But again, the waiver aspect, I'm managing it, but I would not say I'm successfully managing it. I need to spend a lot more time. And then some of my leagues, after the initial waiver run, they go into first come, first serve. So I've missed players out on that. Just because somebody comes out of retirement, or Josh Gordon, passes a drug test finally, or whatever it is. But, that player was available in that league. Well, I'm not going to remember that. So,
and I'll speak for Scott a little bit. He's actually has a lot of co-owned teams where the other guy kind of does the daily management. So he has it a little bit easier. I mean, I know you have a few co-managed or co-owned teams, but most of those are yours, correct?
Yeah, a lot of them. I would say 5 or 6 are with Mitch, but he's getting up there too. I think he's right around 30. So and there have been leagues where that I would handle the waiver wire claims and everything, and maybe we had a disagreement that I blew our whole budget on Buck Allen when he signed with the Saints in the preseason. But that was only a few leagues. But yeah, it is really difficult. So if you have a co-owner, it probably is good to split up the responsibilities so you're never missing out on certain players. That's a good idea.
And even though it was kind of asked as a joke, I always see this question on Twitter. How many leagues is too many leagues? And it's different for every person. It's all about, once you start getting to a point where you're like frazzled and it's not enjoyable, that's when you cut down on leagues. But look, I'm just barely into double digits, and I'm like, I think this is kind of like my limit. Like, I'm still enjoying it, but I feel like if I add 5 more, I'm going to be overwhelmed. But JB, you're higher up there, but you're enjoying it, you're having fun, and that's what I always tell people. It's like, when it stops becoming fun, like, cut some leagues. Like, and I always tell people, and Bill and I talked about this at the end of last fantasy season. If you're in a league and you're not enjoying that league, like, don't hesitate to just reach out to the commission, say, hey man, it's been great. I think I'm going to duck out for the following year. I want to give you the time in order for you to find somebody and get them in there and get them paid up and everything. Because
you made a really good point. I think as long as you are having fun and not getting too frazzled, I think a certain level of frazzledness is okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a word, and one thing that really helps me too, and Bill, we've talked about this. I'm trying to, I would say 95% of my leagues, maybe 90%, are on my fantasy league, and then the group chats are in Group Me.
Yeah.
Granted, we have a few that are in Twitter messages, but I'm trying to get everything, because last year I was on Yahoo and ESPN for redraft, my fantasy league, RSO for a contract league, sleeper, and then the full-time league. So I was in 6 different league platforms, and then you throw in Twitter messages, Group Me, the sleeper DMs, all these different things. I had like 13 or 14 apps that I had to manage, and cutting that back a little bit has really helped. And it's
Yeah.
allowed me to be more engaged, because I feel guilty if I'm not engaged in a league, because I kind of take on the level of activity the league has. And if it's a super active league, I spend a lot of time there. If it's a dead league, it kind of makes things easier for me. But I try to maintain that level of activity that the rest of the league brings. And I feel really guilty if it's on a Slack chat or something that I'm not checking often. I really do feel bad. So,
and I so agree with you, because the majority of my Dynasty leagues are on MFL. I have a couple on Sleeper, but once redraft starts, I'm not in a lot of redraft leagues anymore. But I think this year they will all be on ESPN, which I'm fine with. Like you said, when you're in MFL and Sleeper and Yahoo and ESPN, and then you have Slack and you have GroupMe, and then there's Twitter. About half of my leagues are Twitter DMs, and half of them are GroupMe, and that's cool because I'm on Twitter all the time anyway, so it doesn't matter that they're there. And then the rest of them are in GroupMe, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, that can just be overwhelming. Going, oh crap, I have one Yahoo league that I didn't check because it's one league in Yahoo, and I had to check my 10 in MFL and my 5 in Sleeper. And then you're like, oh, this one over here, I kind of gets forgotten about. So
I had a few situations during the season after I set my lineup, and then there was a late scratch or somebody was injured, and Sunday morning I left him in my lineup, and later in the day I looked at it, I'm like, well, there's a goose egg. And luckily it didn't really cost me anything of significance, but it's, again, I get embarrassed if that happens, because I really do.
Yep.
I spend so much time on this stuff. So I take it seriously.
And another thing that I kind of thought about was, I'm getting to that point where if I'm in a league chat and I'm talking to somebody and they ask me about something, I'm having a hard time remembering that roster now. Like, at a certain point, I was able to rattle off exactly who I had, or at least I knew like the main pieces in every team. And once you get over a certain point, there's actually more work to go, okay, hold on, I got to figure out who's on that team. And, because I can't react immediately because I don't know the construction of all of my teams anymore.
I have people reach out to me and they'll be like, what do you want for Le'Veon Bell? And I say, okay, what league? And then this actually happened today. Oh, it's the Scott Fish Safe League. Again, which one? Like, I need more details. Like, which league are we in together?
A lot of my teams are all named the same. Mm-hmm. So I'll be like, okay, which league? Oh, it's for the Hooligans. Okay, I have like 18 teams named the Hooligans. It's like, you need to tell me which league it is. I'm sorry.
Well, it's funny because I always respond, like, someone will say, who would you like for whoever? And my immediate response is, send me an offer. And it's not because I'm trying to be a jerk about it, but I want to see the offer in an email so that then I know what league to go to and look. And then I'll go, oh, so you offered me, A, B, and C. Well, I really like A and B, and maybe if you throw in a second round pick, we can get it done. Because if you're like, oh, who do you want for, Dak Prescott? I have Dak Prescott in so many places. Dude, I don't know if this is 12, 14, 16 teams. I don't know anything. So I'm like, send me an offer. That's always my response when someone says, and then I can look at it. And then usually what I do, especially in MFL, is I'll leave that trade there, and then I'll go to I'll go to offer a trade so I can see what they have on their team, what I have on my team, and try to make something that works. So that's always my answer to that question, because I don't know. So I think we got one more here. So this is from Kane Fossil at Devi_Kane. He said he's writing an article for DLF about rookies that will be overdrafted. Who do you believe will be drafted way too high? So JB, why don't you start off and let us know what rookies you think will be overdrafted?
So for the first one, I'm not going to spend much time. I'm not going to spend any time because we talked about him already. Cam Akers, he's on my list. Again, I have him at running back 6. I'm always seeing him go before that. Another one, Zach Moss. I know there's people that really like him. Bill, we talked about him last week on Dynasty Theory. I just can't see him really having a role that is going to be that he's going to get high volume. I like Devin Singletary. I still think he's going to be heavily utilized in that offense. And I know people are saying, well, Zach Moss is just a bigger and better Devin Singletary. I don't think that's the case. And I think people are going to be very disappointed. And I've seen Zach Moss go as early as 201 in Superflex rookie drafts. That's way too early for me. And then another one, and this has absolutely nothing to do with talent, Jerry Jeudy. I think he is a phenomenal player, but where he's going at, 108, 19, 1010 or 110.
110.
Yeah, 1010. It's a secret pick in some of my leagues. If you have the 1010, you're in good shape.
Nice.
But I just don't see really the opportunity in that offense. And I love Drew Lock. I do. But you have all the other weapons in that offense. I think Jerry Jeudy is going at a place in drafts where I'd much rather have other players, especially if I have that 1010.
Yes, I agree. And actually, that's a good call because he was the first person that popped into my head. Now, I have him in both of our Superflex Army leagues for some reason, but he was the first person to pop into my head for people are going to be maybe not so happy with the results of 2020.
And he's so good. It has nothing
He is,
to do
absolutely.
with He is so good.
That's why I think, I'm okay having him on my team just because I know the talent's there, and at some point it'll be fine. But I truly, if I'm playing, the market, it's probably a bad pick right now. And because there's so many other wide receivers with more opportunity right now. So I 100% agree with that call. That was the first player that popped into my head. I actually moved him second on my list just because I'm like, okay, JB's got him, so we'll let him go with that. But my guy was AJ Dillon. I think, he's going anywhere from I would say 204 to 210 range most of the time. But I'm not sure I see a lot out of him this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of disappointment, again, from the same reasons that we were talking about earlier with the rookies. I mean, Jamal Williams is still there. And so, I mean, he's not just going to give up. And he's a guy who, has taken half the carries the last couple of years next to Aaron Jones. So he was my other pick besides Jeudy, was Dillon.
Yeah, love that Dillon pick. I think a lot of people are making the prediction that Aaron Jones won't be back in Green Bay in 2021. So that means that AJ Dillon is just going to walk right in and he's going to become Aaron Jones. And I think a trap that, people fall into is that we just assume that the players that are on this team are going to be the players that are on this team forever. And we talked about it a little bit with, Darrell Henderson. He was drafted in the 3rd round last year. So what do the Rams do this year in the 2nd round? They draft Cam Akers. And, we can't predict what Green Bay is going to do in next year's draft. Or they, maybe Todd Gurley becomes a free agent and Green Bay signs. We can't predict any of that. So to sit here and say that AJ Dillon is there, it'll be running back by committee this year, and then Aaron Jones leaves and AJ Dillon becomes the guy I think it's kind of faulty logic in my opinion. I think there's a lot of steps to get to AJ Dillon being the starter in Green Bay, and I usually don't like making those giant leaps when drafting a player. One guy that I think will be overdrafted is Brandon Ayuk. It's not a guy that I was really a fan of going into the draft, and I see him going in the 201 to 204 range. And I mean, that's not really a spot that I would want to take him in. I think there are a lot better. I think there are a lot more guys that are better in that position than Brandon Ayuk. And honestly, I know that uh, I know that Debo is going to get his touches in that offense. I know the 14 running backs that they have are going to get some series of touches in that offense. And I know that George Kittle's going to get touches. And besides that, I don't know who's locked in, and I don't know if Brandon Ayuk is that guy. I could be dead wrong about that, but he's a guy that I think is being overdrafted.
How do you feel about him, Bauer?
I have him on a few rosters just because he did slip a little bit. There's always going to be a wide receiver I like more than him. Mims, Pittman,
Yep.
T. Higgins. I'll take all three of them over Brandon Ayuk. It just, again, it's very similar to the situation in Denver. It's a team that wants to run the ball. You have Debo Samuel, you have George Kittle, and then you have running backs that can catch the ball. And Garoppolo, he's not really being asked to light the scoreboard up. He's not going to throw 600 pass attempts, especially with how strong that defense is.
Mm-hmm.
He's somebody that I have really not been targeting, again, just because there's other wide receivers in that range that I would much rather have.
Yeah, we got him at 212, I think, in Superflex Army.
And I don't hate that.
That's a good,
at that point.
I mean,
you're getting a first round wide receiver, regardless of how you feel about their abilities. I mean, I think that's a winning play right there, regardless. But yeah, I think when you get into that mid second and lower, there's other guys I'd much rather take. And yeah, I agree. Like, he's just a guy. He's hard to, like, analytics guys don't like him. Film guys kind of do, but I mean, you got to kind of go, do I trust Shanahan? And that's the question, I guess. And I don't know the answer, but I'm okay having him on my roster for the right price, like you said. But yeah, he's not a guy I'm taking over any of those guys that you guys mentioned.
Right. And not that it's the same situation, but we saw how high people were on Dante Pettis. And Shanahan's he's not one to shy away from pulling the plug on a player. Sure. If for one reason or another he doesn't fit the scheme, whether it's off the field things in the locker room. And I'm not saying Brandon Ayuk and Dante Pettis are by any means the same player, but there could be a situation where, okay, he's not exactly fitting in the way we had hoped. He's not going to get the run that typically a first round wide receiver would get.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking earlier about our hits and our misses. One hit I remember from before, during last offseason, I guess, people were high on Dante Pettis, and I was the one voice that was like, I just don't see it. I saw someone compare him to Odell Beckham, and I was like, I don't see that. Even Madman from Dynasty Trades HQ and I went back and forth on Pettis. I mean, I don't think there were a lot of people out there who were low on Pettis. I was one of them, and it was because of the Debo draft pick. I really liked Debo coming out of South Carolina. He was a guy that could do everything, and South Carolina kind of showed. They kind of put him in the positions to do everything, and I thought he was going to be good. And so far, I mean, it's only been 1 year, but so far, I've been proven right. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Pettis is a prime example of Shanahan just kind of saying, and I don't know what the deal was. Some people were saying he came to camp out of shape. So, there were a whole bunch of different, conspiracies and reasonings about why Shanahan, kind of pulled the plug on him. But, look, I hope I'm wrong. Obviously, every guy who gets drafted in the NFL, it's their dream to get there. They've worked their whole lives to get there. I hope they're all successful. But as we all know, when we talk about, we nail about 50% of our first round rookie picks, and those percentages just drop drastically as we go round by round. We know they're not all going to make it. And unfortunately, I think Ayuk is going to be one of those guys.
And unfortunately, their dreams, they don't get us fantasy points. So
nope. I mean, It's awesome that you said that because honestly, that's what we care about. We want the guys on our team that are going to score us points, and it's funny because we really don't care how. I mean, if San Francisco does a wide receiver sweep with Debo and he runs for 50 yards, we don't care that they're rushing yards. They're points that we have on our team. It's always funny when people make the argument, well, he's a running back that just catches the ball. Listen,
Right.
if he's Austin Eckler or CMC and they're catching, 80, 90, 100 passes, I don't care. That's how I'm getting my points. I'm getting my points, and that's the name of the game. You're right. Dreams, unfortunately, don't get us any dynasty or fantasy points. So.
And I always laugh because as a fantasy community, we can be kind of heartless. I think we're the only people where somebody loses their job. We're like, yeah, Frank Gore's out of Buffalo. Let's go. Could you imagine if people, Bill, Josh, myself, if any of us lost our job and like, yes, John just got let go. Let's go.
Yes, Nancy's going to get his chance.
Nancy just got a value bump.
Oh, could you imagine that?
She's so young. Like
that
she had a great breakout age.
That would be terrible and hilarious at the same time. So John just lost his job, but Frank.
Wait, who's behind John?
Frank just graduated from college, and I mean, he's a go-getter. He's young, he's active.
He's right behind Nancy, so he's next in line.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, Nancy takes one day off. Frank, he's coming right in there taking that job.
You should see funny. Frank's words per minute typed, absolutely off the charts.
I mean,
the agility.
I've seen the guy. I saw his tape in college. That guy's a typing machine. And I think his words per minute can actually get better. I mean, the right kind of coaching, he gets in with a good group. He can be elite. So it would be funny if all of our jobs kind of had the same fanfare as the NFL. But on that note, John, man, thanks a lot for coming on. I mean, actually, you know what? Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so this was one that I saw today, and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because our good buddy John Hogue got into a very spirited debate. Hold on, let me just pull up the guy's name because I want to give him credit too. Because
I have to. Is this about Aaron Rodgers? Because that's all John Hogue tweets about is Aaron Rodgers. I swear.
You're close. It's about Jordan Love. So I'll pull up the original question and then I'll get into the debate. So
you pull that up, but in the meantime, do you have it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
C3 stats at C3_stats says Dynasty startup Superflex. Which QB would you rather have? Cam Newton or Jordan Love? So we'll quick go around and just give our opinions on it. We don't have to get too deep into it. But startup, I think at one point he says Jordan Love goes 5 picks ahead of Cam in this startup that he's doing.
I'll take Cam Newton because I think there's a better chance that he sees a value bump earlier than Jordan Love. You look at Aaron Rodgers' contract, he's not going anywhere, and I'd be shocked if he's anywhere before at least 2022 with the dead cap, unless a team, somehow they maneuver around that and they take on a good portion of that. Right. But I think there's a better chance that we see Cam Newton get a starting job before Jordan Love. So based on that alone, and the value spike instantly whenever a player gets a starting job, especially as a quarterback in super flex leagues, I'll take Cam Newton. With that said, I'm not a big Cam Newton guy, and I have very few shares of him.
What about you, Bill?
I think that's a legit reason, and I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but I think I'm taking Jordan Love here because I think we're actually going to see Love play a lot sooner than we think. Like,
Okay,
I
that
think.
sounds very cryptic. What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so everybody
Do you
thinks
work for the Packers? Do you have inside info?
I think that at some point they're gonna get sick of Rodgers, and they might not have to get rid of him. They might bench him, and I think that. And I'm saying like the middle. I'm not saying this year, but I think that there could be midway through next year, like in 2021, where they say, okay, we're going to throw him out here now because we need to see what we have. We know we're getting rid of Rodgers next year. And who knows? They might get rid of Rodgers next year, post June 1, because then they're able to get rid of him earlier. So I think we actually may see Jordan Love sooner than a lot of people are thinking.
But I still think Cam Newton gets a shot again before that. And I think the reason
I don't know.
I think the reason he hasn't been signed is because of all the stuff going on in the world right now and teams maybe not being able to really see him. But and again, I'm the furthest thing from a Cam Newton proponent.
Sure.
But I think that we're going to see a value bump there for him before we see it for Jordan Love.
I can appreciate that. That's why I think I would take Jordan Love, because I feel like the value bump will be much greater, and it's not going to be as long as a lot of people think.
Well, it's funny because, I said to answer it quickly, and I wanted to go into no. Trust me, it kind of worked out perfectly because JB went with Hogue's side, which was Cam Newton. He's going to get a job. That's going to be a bump, And you went with. Hold on, let me pull up his name so I don't.
You already said it.
No, I didn't say the other guy's name.
The stats guy, right?
No, he presented the question.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
I think everybody needs to find somebody that loves them as much as John Hogue loves Aaron Rodgers.
So true. And
I think he'll admit that.
I love John Hogue. Like, he's one of my favorite people in the whole, podcasting world. Like, I love John Hogue, but him and I completely disagree on so much when it comes to philosophy and everything. It's so funny. Like, we were like polar opposites in strategy and everything, but I love the guy.
So the guy that John was debating with was Travis Robinson at Skins Fan Trav. And it's funny because JB mirrored a lot of John Hogue's argument, and you actually mirrored a lot of Travis's argument because, Travis, is wondering if and when Cam is going to get a job, because obviously I think the biggest reason why Cam doesn't have a job right now is, like JB said, with everything going on in the world, teams want their doctors to see Cam and make sure everything is working properly before they sign him to a contract. I mean, we see the workout hype videos and everything, but that's not the same as having a doctor put hands on a guy, twist them, bend them, ask them important medical questions, and get that assurance that Cam is fully healed, Cam is ready to go.
And that's exactly what it depends on what you believe the result is going to be from that. And that's where you're going to lean one way or the other based on that. So you guys seem to, like, Hogue and Bauer seem to be a little bit more in the belief that he's going to be cleared medically, because if he's not cleared medically, then he's worthless.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's a reason that they just cut him. Granted, there was salary involved, but there's a reason they just cut him and they couldn't trade him. And I get it, because nobody could check out his, that he can get his physicals and that sort of thing. But if I don't believe that he's necessarily going to be healthy Cam and pass physicals, then, I mean, the answer is obvious in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just a difference on how you're going to interpret what happens next.
Right. And just to be fair, and you know what, I also want to shout these guys out too. I want to shout out John and Travis, because they had a spirited debate that didn't get into name calling. It didn't turn dirty. It didn't, and like you said, Bill, it's cool for you and JB to see that question, have two totally different opinions on it, have reasoning behind your opinions, and just say, hey man, I feel one way, you feel the other way. It's cool, and move on. There's way too many Twitter debates that get into that you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about,
That's
and it's
actually
like
the message I'm going to send Bill after we're done recording here.
Well, he's right. I am stupid, but the point is, and Josh and I were having the same thing in one of our chats, and I was like, we'd make great trade partners. Like, that's the way you got to look at it. Hey, we don't agree on this situation. That's okay. Guess what? We can make a trade because we don't agree. Like,
yeah,
we're both happy.
Because it's funny. I made a trade in another league that Bill's not a part of, and I said, hey, Bill, I just want to run this by you and see what you think. I had already made the trade, so whether Bill said it was a great trade or a terrible trade, the trade was made, and I felt fine with it. And it was Philip Lindsay and 2021 seconds for the 209, the 303, the 309, and the 403 in a 12-team superflex. So
who did you get with that second you got back?
No, I got 2021 seconds.
Oh.
So he got Lindsay and the 221 seconds, and there was two late seconds. Is that correct, Josh?
One late second, 2/3, and a fourth.
Oh, I like that. I was going the other way. I thought you were getting the picks in this year's draft.
No. I got Lindsay in the 221 seconds.
Yeah, I like that.
So
and I didn't. So it was like, and it's not like I hated it, right? Like it's just a matter of what you believe in Lindsay.
And that's where we came to. That's where he made the point. Oh, we would make great trade partners because obviously I made the trade, so I liked my side of the trade. And he originally offered me Darrell Henderson and those 21 seconds. And I'm not a Darrell Henderson guy. I still think Philip Lindsay is going to be underrated this season. I still think he's going to get a lot of burn. Obviously Melvin Gordon's in town. He's not going to put up the stats that he put up in previous years. I mean, there's, unless Melvin Gordon gets hurt, but I still think Philip Lindsay is talented, and I think he is going to score points. And in my opinion, it was better having Lindsay in there than Darrell Henderson. So
I think my man Royce, I think he's the odd one out there in that backfield.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree with that.
Unfortunately.
Agreed. So we got a lot in today. John, thank you for coming on, man. Like I said, I enjoy you. Not only are you a smart guy, but you're really entertaining. Why don't you just let everyone know where they can find you, what you're doing, and where you're at?
Yeah, and I apologize. My furnace just kicked on. I don't know if you can hear it, if it's picking up on the mic at all.
No.
Oh, then I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe you can just edit
just
that part
the sultry sounds of JB.
Yeah.
Ooh.
No, so you can find me on Twitter at the Bauer Club. And then follow the show Dynasty Theory. It's at Dynasty Theory FF on Twitter and Instagram. And then my co-host Mitch Sorensen, that's at DynoMC on Twitter. I always give them a shout out. And Dan Lamagna at FF Coach Dan. And then we have the YouTube channel. We have some things that are going to be specific to YouTube. It's going to be exclusive, not being on our feed, just on YouTube. So check that out also. Again, that's Dynasty Theory, the YouTube channel. So guys, thank you so much. I had a blast. I could talk to you guys all night.
For sure.
Same here, and appreciate it. And, everybody who was in the live stream, YouTube live stream, thanks a lot. John McGlynn was throwing some stuff out there. Jerry O'Shea was throwing some stuff out there. Appreciate you guys. If you are, on YouTube, just remember that we're switching over to the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network YouTube feed for next week. You can either search them on YouTube, or we will throw the link in the description for you guys so you can find us next week. If you're listening to us on podcast form, we appreciate it. Every listen is, Bill and I appreciate it. We talk about it all the time. Just we're lucky that anyone wants to listen to us ramble on about, Royce Freeman and 2021 second round picks and all that stuff. We appreciate it. You can, if you're listening to us, tell a friend. They can find us on just about any podcast directory that's out there. And while you're listening, leave us a rate and review. We appreciate it. It helps us out, and it lets us know what you guys are thinking. So on that note, Bill, we are out of here.
Late.